Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. After Renaissance in England, the next stage that started in English literature and English history, that is known as Neoclassicism or Neoclassical Age. It is also known as period of enlightenment, period of sensibility, age of sensibility, or age of reasoning, age of human nature, age of common human nature, understanding common human nature and problems in human nature. And it lasts from 1660 to 1798. Neoclassical, first you need to understand why we call it neoclassical age or neoclassicism. Neo means new, something that is modern or new. And classical, as everybody knows, that it means ancient. Some, I mean, 1500 years ago, 2000 years ago, something that is quite old. So, in this age, neoclassical, the writers of this time they were actually copying the great writers like Virgil and Horace of Greek writers in somewhere, those who were very popular in Greek times under the kingship of Augustus Caesar, Emperor Augustus. So this age is actually a mixture of Greek literature and modern ideas. So the ideas they were mixed. So from about 15 1600 literature and ideas they were skipped. The writers they introduced their ideas by copying literature from Greek, the ancient times. And this age is divided into three categories. Uh, Here division. Neoclassical age, it has three categories. First is the restoration period. Restoration period, it is from 1660 to 1700. Then we have Augustan period, that from 1700 to 1750. And then age of Johnson or age of sensibility from 1750 to 1798. The common objectives or the characteristics of this age were, because one thing we must keep in mind, that the historians and the literary figures they give one name to a specific era or specific time, because the writers and the thinkers and the philosophers they share common themes and common styles of writing. When something that is, they find something common between the writers, they declared it one specific age. So in this neoclassical age from 1660 to 1798, more or less, the writers they share the same ideas, the same themes, the same problems of society, whatever they want to, and their styles of writing they were somehow similar. But one thing uh, we must keep in our minds, that similarity between the writers doesn't mean that they were similar in each and every aspect. To some extent, some of their writings they were similar. So in this, the characteristics were the discussion of the writers that was about human nature, like nothing about religion, nothing, not making religion supernatural, not making man supernatural, but bringing man to normal life. Normal life means to understanding humans, to understand human nature according to the as the humans they have built in qualities, as the humans they are made of. So what kind of thinkings the human have. It was also age of logic and reason. In this specific age, nothing was, they do not talk about religion, they do not talk about human supremacy, they do not talk about religious supremacy. So it was actually a mixture of both. Because when they try to find reasoning, they try to find logic. When you talk about logic, scientific reasoning, then you do not talk about supernatural. You cannot find follow any supernatural elements. If you follow supernatural, then your reasoning is almost over. So in this period, it was so make a comparison between medieval age, Renaissance, and this age. Because in medieval age, it was all religious supremacy. There was nothing else. They did not talk about humans. They talk about religious supremacy. When it comes to Renaissance, then they talk about humans, and they made human a flawless person, flawless, somebody who doesn't have a, you can say, a person who doesn't have any kind of flaws in his personality, or the humans, they were made supernatural. But in this period after Renaissance, it was neither religion nor human supremacy. It was the supremacy of the reason, logic, and human nature. So the writers, they share the similar characteristics of order, accuracy, and structure. So their focus was on order and accuracy. That what was if they were talking about reasoning, then the reason there must be accuracy of reasoning and structure also. And in this age, we talk about when we talk about literature, uh, it the types of literature, the genres of literature that became famous in this time, they were essays, parodies, satires, letters, fables, melodramas, and rhyming couplets. So these were, and also novels. This was the time when actually this was novel became very popular, or novel became very famous. There were many novelists, too many novelists. They came in market at that time. They wrote many novels, and most famous novels, they were also written in this period, from 1660 to 1798. So let's talk about the first one is, as I've already told you, that division, and then let's talk about restoration period, the first one from 1660 to 1700. Restoration period, first you need to understand what restoration means. Restoration means to restore someone. Like if you are doing a job of a policeman, and suddenly you have been removed from your post uh, due to any reasons. But after some time, 10 years, 5 years, 5 months, 5 days, you've been again reappointed on the same position with same authority. That is known as re- restoring someone. To restore someone where you were, you have been appointed on the same place. So in this restoration period, what happened that from somewhere 1648 to 1649 till 1660, there was no king in England. Uh, Before that, it was monarchy, kings, they were ruling, but at that time there was no king. And when there were no kings, the authority that was in the hands of religious men, they were known as Puritans. The Puritans, they were in favor of church, and they wanted to bring reforms in the church. They thought that there is too many things that need to be reformed. So Puritans and the Parliament, some chosen people, both these parties, religion and Parliament, they shared authority, they shared power, and they ruled England. In 1660, the British King Charles II, he was restored. He was in France, and he was brought back from France, and he was restored as a king. So that was end of Puritans. That is why it is known as restoration period, because the monarchy or kingship that restarted again in England. And it has classical and French influence on literature. Uh, French influence, it was French Revolution. So the time of French Revolution was also there. uh, Influence of French, it must be there, because the king, he was already living in France when he was brought back to England. So a common sense prevails that French influence had to be there on literature. Now let's talk about, and classical, as I already told you, ancient Greek. The writers, they were copied, their works, they were translated, and they became very popular. So this was the time that the English writers, they started copying and translating the works of great Greek writers into English. So first, the greatest writer of Restoration period is John Dryden. John Dryden, he was a multi-talented person. He is not known only for his writing as plays or poetries, not specifics. We cannot single out him on one specific genre of literature. So he wrote about tragedy, comedies, heroic plays, satires, translation of classical works that made actually John Dryden most popular when he translated Virgil and Horace, the famous uh, poets in 43 BC. The date I don't remember exactly, somewhere in 43 BC, 44 BC. So their works, they were translated, and he was also the one who actually started prose work, started writing essays. So his works, they became very popular because those translated works, the people, they liked it very much. And the other most famous writer of this period is John Milton, the famous one who wrote Paradise Lost, the epic. Like the incident that we had in our religion, Islam, that Adam and Eve, Hazrat Adam and Hazrat Hawa alayhi salam, both they were, when they were banished from paradise, when Satan, he hatched a conspiracy against them. So we have in our religion. So same is the case in Christianity. The same story is there. So John Milton, he wrote his Paradise Lost in 1664 or 1665, somewhere. 10 volumes were published, and 1674 12 volumes of the book were published. Then we have John Locke. He was a philosopher, he was a political writer. And then William Temple, John Bunyan, and Ephraim Bann. So these were the famous writers of that time. So you can say that this Restoration period, it is mostly known as for the translated works of Greek writers by John Dryden and John Milton's Paradise Lost. These are the two most prominent works of this age. Let's move to the next one, Augustan Age. Now, Augustan Age, why we call it Augustan Age from 1700 to 1750? We call it Augustan Age because when I talk about this Virgil and Horace, when that works were translated in English, the great poets Virgil and Horace. At that time, when Virgil and Horace, as I have already told you in the beginning, when they existed, King, King or Emperor Augustus Caesar, he ruled Greek. So because in this from 1700 to 1750, they were translating Virgil and Horace from they were Greek. So at that time, when Virgil and Horace, they existed in 43 44 BC or 50 BC, at that time their emperor was Augustus Caesar, Emperor Augustus. So from that typical name, this age is known as Augustan Age, because the influence of the Greek writer was much more there. Now, do not be confused, because we are talking about the divisions of Neoclassical Age. Neoclassical Age is actually known for the translations of Greek works, Greek writers, Greek poets. But as we have divided it, so we are over and over again repeating it, that how it was the works were translated, and the ancient when they translated it, the ancient philosophy and the ancient ideas, they were brought into for the common people in 17th 18th century, sorry, from 1660 to 1798. And that is why it is known as Augustan Age. So in 1700, the age is given the name Augustan because of about 1700 years ago. From that time, a king ruled whose name was Augustan, and under his emperorship, there were great Greek writers and poets. So their works were actually translated. That is why this age is also termed as Augustan Age. Historians, they have termed it, named it as Augustan Age. So imitation of Virgil and Horace, imitation means to copy something, to translate, to copy. So their works, their philosophies, their ideas, they were translated in this specific age. And our the writers of that time were Alexander Pope, uh, famous. He is famous for his essays. He wrote essays also, and then he wrote the most famous one, the Epic Rape of the Lock. We will discuss it in other lectures also. Then Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift wrote Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels, there is a movie also in Gulliver's Travels that a man, just like us, a human being, a common man, somewhere he's been thrown in another world where very small people they are living there, and he is quite, that's the story is very interesting. If you watch that movie, I will send you a link in the description, you can watch it. So Gulliver's Travels, the famous work of Jonathan Swift. Daniel Defoe was another. Henry Fielding, the novelist. So this was the time when actually the novels they emerged. The novel writing it emerged. The novel named Pamela and Tom Jones. These were the famous novels they were written in those that time. From almost 1740 or 1739 to 1750, these 10 years there were many novelists those who started writing, and books were easily available for everyone. So at that time these writers, the Henry Fielding, first he started writing plays, then he started writing novels. So these were the famous novels about Samuel Richardson and Henry Fielding. You will read its novel. I will upload their novels, famous novels, lecture on some other day. And Joseph Addison was the next one. Then age of Johnson, or age of sensibility, it is also known, from sensibility is known as reasoning, sensibility. So again I repeat it, when I talked about neoclassical, as I told you that one specific age is given some specific name, because the writers, the poets, the writers, the playwrights, they all share somehow the similar themes. Not, if not 100%, then almost 80%, 70% they share similar themes and similar ideas. Here again, when we talk about age of Johnson, it is also known as age of sensibility. But in the beginning, we have talked about it that it is also known as period of enlightenment, or age of enlightenment, age of reasoning. So in all this from 1660 to 1798, we talk about reasoning and human nature. So in this specific time, French and American Revolution, the most famous French Revolution, America, it was under control of Britain. There was civil war going on, so America got its freedom at that time. And then French Revolution, the famous one. I mean, you can also read about it on Wikipedia, on Google also. French Revolution is one of the most famous revolutions in the history, when the people of England, the people of France, the French men and women, they rebel against the monarch who was unable to give them, bread and butter. So they revolted, or they rebelled against him. So this was the time of French Revolution. You can say when there is a revolution, the common men, they were throwing away the kings. So it was the time of sensibility, time of approach of common men. So common man was given value at that time. Structure of the neoclassical writers to emotional writings of romanticism. So this was the time when these writers from 1750 to I have written it 1790, but it is actually 1798. From 1750 to 1798, that is known as Age of Johnson. Now, why we call it Age of Johnson? Because Samuel Johnson, you will read about it. I will upload lectures about him. He was a great essay writer, great critic. He wrote preface to Shakespeare, his great work. And the most famous work of Samuel Johnson was compiling English dictionary. This was the first time when English dictionary was compiled and published. Oh, there is a story about it, when Samuel Johnson, he thought that a dictionary, uh, Dictionary means a book containing all the words of one language. It should be compiled. So he wrote a letter to mayor of the city, to mayor of London, that I need some funds or I need some help or support because I want to write a book that would contain all the words of English. So he responded that everybody laughed at him, that how is it possible that all the words of one language, how can they be compiled in one book? Different people, they have different accents, they have different words, so how it would be very difficult to collect all the words of one language, specifically of English. But he kept working on from 1745 to almost 17, it took him 9 years. So in 1755 his English dictionary, it was completed and then it was published. So before this Oxford and Cambridge dictionaries, Dr. Samuel Johnson's dictionary was having the authority over all other books or dictionaries. So that is why it is known as Age of Johnson, because he did a great work of compiling dictionary and specifically of criticism. That is why this age is from 1750 to 1798. It is given to his dedicated to his name as Age of Johnson. From emotional writings to romanticism, because romantics writers, they appear in 1798, when you must have read the name of William Wordsworth, his poem in your class 9th, 10th or first year in your college or school, Daffodils. So William Wordsworth is known as a romantic poet, because romantic poet is, again, when we talk about romantic poets or romanticism, it goes one step forward towards common people. So this was the time to discuss the common people. So William Wordsworth and Coleridge, and other poet, both of them, they compiled a book of their poems, and they named it, the name of the book was Lyrical Ballads, and it was published in 1798. When the book Lyrical Ballads, it was published, then this Neoclassical Age, or Age of Enlightenment, or Age of Sensibility, it ended, and Romantic Age, it started. That I would upload lecture in next lecture I will upload it. And the most famous writers of course, Samuel Johnson was the most famous one of this age. And this was also the time when the Gothic novel, it also started. There are two famous Gothic novels that I will upload lectures about it. Samuel Johnson, of course, Edward Gibbons, George Crabbe, Robert Burns, William Cooper, Thomas Gray, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. So these were all the famous writers of that time. But Samuel Johnson, he was matchless. He was excellent of that time. I mean, you can say today we are discussing, whenever we forget a word of English or even any other language, we just write it on Google or just download a dictionary and we start looking at it without knowing that when it was compiled, uh, he was mocked, he was laughed, Samuel Johnson, but he did not lose heart and he carried on his work, and in 1755 he published it. So this was about Neoclassical Age, that it started from 1660 and it ended in 1798 after Renaissance. Before that it was medieval times, then Renaissance. Now we are discussing about Neoclassical Age, and now in next lecture we will discuss from 1798, the 19th century poets and the writers, and that age is known as Romantic Age also. So that's it for Neoclassical Age. There are many other, if we go into the details of this age, then there are many other things also that we will discuss.